They said I was paranoid, just an old vet obsessed with snow and silence. But I knew what that ridge was hiding. And when HOA Karen lit her fireworks on that unstable snowpack, she didn't just break the law. She woke the mountain. Seconds later, the slope split open. Avalanche. Homes crushed. Screams buried in white. And while she ran, I stayed digging survivors out with my own hands. But the snow wasn't the only thing coming down that night. So was everything she built. You won't believe what we uncovered next, and how I made sure she never held power again. This is the story of how one spark lit the fuse, and justice roared down like an avalanche. They always laughed at me behind closed doors. I wasn't naive. After 22 years in the Army, most of them spent in frozen hellholes across Alaska and the Hindu Kush, I could read a room the same way I could read a snowpack by the tiny fractures no one else bothered to notice. When I moved to Aspen Ridge, a pristine HOA-governed mountain neighborhood tucked high beneath the Blue Elk Range, all I wanted was quiet. I paid cash for the cabin the week after burying my wife, hoping the thin air at 9,000 feet would finally hush the noise inside my skull. For a while, it worked. Then Karen arrived. Karen wasn't her real name. At least not the one on her driver's license, but that was what every single resident called her sometimes, with affection. More often like a curse whispered behind a gloved hand. Tall, sharp-angled, always wrapped in the same blood-red HOA-issued parka, as if she were personally leading an assault on K2. Karen Lowell had seized the presidency of the Aspen Ridge Homeowners Association in under 6 months. She didn't walk so much as patrol. She didn't speak so much as issue decrees. Order wasn't just something she enforced. It was the air she breathed. And power, real petty, intoxicating power, was what she loved most. But above all else, what Karen truly obsessively loved was spectacle. 3 weeks before New Year's Eve, she strode into the monthly HOA meeting boots, leaving wet prints across the lodge floor, and announced with the bright certainty of a general unveiling battle plans. We're bringing back the fireworks show this year. Right on Firewatch Ridge, bigger and louder than ever. Firewatch Ridge wasn't some gentle meadow. It was a long, steep, north-facing shelf of snow looming directly above every roof in Aspen Ridge. That slope hadn't slid in over a decade, which to anyone who actually understood mountain weather meant it was overdue. The early December storm had dumped 3 feet of dense snow on top of a weak, faceted layer I'd personally dug pits to confirm. Angle 38 degrees in the starting zone, aspect shaded all day. Recent loading wind slabs buried surface horror. Every red flag in the book was flying. I knew it the way I once knew the smell of an ambush before it happened. I raised my hand slowly, calmly. Ma'am, with respect, that ridge is primed. Detonating anything with a concussion wave up there risks triggering a hard slab avalanche, class 3, possibly 4. Have you consulted the Colorado Avalanche Information Center? Karen's smile was thin and bright as a knife edge. Mr. Riker, thank you for your service truly. But this is Colorado. We've shot fireworks off that ridge for 30 years. It's tradition. I'd appreciate it if you didn't bring wartime paranoia into a community celebration. I'm not paranoid, I said, voice level. I'm telling you the snowpack has a persistent weak layer 2 feet down. Commercial-grade shells will send shockwaves straight into it. You're gambling with 30 homes and every life inside them. She tilted her head the way a bored cat watches a mouse that has already lost. Well, Mr. Riker, unless you happen to hold a PhD in glaciology, I'll kindly ask you to keep your personal opinions off the agenda. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Head swiveled. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably. One woman clutched her husband's sleeve. But no one spoke. No one ever spoke when Karen was holding court. She had perfected the art of weaponizing silence. After the meeting, board member Dan cornered me in the icy parking lot, breath fogging under the sodium lights. Hey, Harlan. Look, I actually agree with you, he muttered, rubbing red hands together, but you know how she gets. Vendor's already booked. Some outfit called Pyroworks LLC out of Grand Junction. Non-refundable deposit. I stared past him at the ridge, a black silhouette against the star-drunk sky. They're going to shoot aerial shells from the exact spot that'll propagate a fracture straight down into the neighborhood. Dan winced. From the overlook by the frozen creek, supposed to be a showstopper. Her word, not mine. I'd dug snow pits on that slope more times than I could count. I knew every layer, every temperature gradient, every whisper of wind-loaded cornices. Luck was the only reason it hadn't released yet. To people like Karen, luck looked indistinguishable from permission. By morning, glossy flyers were taped to every mailbox and lamppost. As Penn Ridge New Year's Eve, fireworks, extravaganza, 900 p.m. Firewatch Ridge, hot cocoa live music, community magic. No mention of permits. No mention of avalanche risk. Just a cartoon firework grinning over a cartoon mountain, while real explosives were scheduled to detonate 200 vertical feet above real houses. I called the county permitting office. No record. I called the state fire marshal. Same answer. I emailed the Colorado Avalanche Information Center with photos of my most recent pit shear quality readings and a polite but blunt assessment. Their reply came within hours. Your observations match our current forecast. Persistent slab, extremely touchy. Recreational explosive use strongly discouraged. Slide potential rated high to very high. I forwarded the email to the entire HOA board. Radio silence. 2 days later, certified mail slid through my door slot. A cease and desist letter on Aspen Ridge letterhead, accusing me of alarmist communications that damage community morale. If I continued disseminating unverified claims, they would pursue legal action for libel and defamation. I stood on my porch in the sub-zero dawn, holding that letter, and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I had seen this exact script before. Not from HOA boards, but from lieutenant colonels who refused to cancel a photo op mission because the weather briefer was overly cautious. That was the morning I stopped asking nicely. I went to the basement, unlocked the old Pelican case, and lifted out the military-grade seismograph I hadn't touched since Kandahar. I cleaned it, calibrated it, mounted it on a tripod aimed straight at Firewatch Ridge, and fed it fresh lithium batteries. Then I hiked the service trail at dusk, tucked a 4K trail camera inside a fake pine martin box, and pointed it dead center at the plateau where Karen's vendor was already staging mortar tubes. As I descended, a soft wind lifted dry powder off the ridge crest, like smoke off a fuse. No one wanted to listen. Fine. I would make damn sure someone had to. December 31st dawned blinding white and perfectly still, the kind of cold that makes metal squeal and breath hang in the air like ghosts. From my porch, I watched the neighborhood transform into a scene straight out of a holiday catalog. If the catalog had been shot by someone who'd never once looked up at a loaded alpine slope. Lawn chairs appeared in neat rows. Propane heaters hissed to life. Kids in puffy snowsuits chased each other with glow sticks, while parents balanced paper cups of cocoa and rum. Someone had strung Christmas lights along the trailhead fence. Holiday music, Mariah Carey, of course, pumped from portable speakers. And at the center of it all strode Karen Lowell in her signature crimson parka clipboard, clutched like a field marshal's baton, barking orders with the bright, brittle cheer of a woman who believed the mountain itself would obey if she just spoke loudly enough. "Pop-up tents go here," she snapped, jabbing a gloved finger at a flat patch just below the frozen creek. "Vendor parking at the lower lot. PA system angled north. We want the echo to carry down valley. Let's make this unforgettable." Unforgettable. The word lodged in my throat like a bone. I stood on my porch in Carhartt bibs and bunny boots, coffee steaming in a tin mug, watching her orchestrate chaos with the same precision I once used to move platoons through minefields. The irony tasted metallic. Around noon, the White Pyroworks LLC van rolled in, tires crunching over packed snow. A guy in his mid-30s Joel Navy parka clipboard still had that new hire eagerness, hopped out and started unloading crates stenciled Class 1.4G explosives in bold red letters. Karen greeted him like royalty, all smiles and handshakes. I set my coffee down, walked over. "Morning," I said, offering a hand. "Harlan Riker, you the pyrotechnician." "Joel," he answered, shaking firmly. "Pleasure. You briefed on current snowpack stability up there." Before he could answer, Karen materialized at his elbow. "Harlan, we've discussed this. You're not on the events committee. Please stop harassing our vendor." "I'm not harassing," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I'm asking if Joel here understands he's about to fire 2-inch mortar shells directly over a slope rated Avalanche hazard considerable trending high, with a known persistent weak layer at 45 centimeters. Joel's smile faltered. Karen said the city cleared everything." "There is no city clearance," I told him. "No county permit, no state fire marshal sign-off, and the CAIC has a specific advisory against explosive use in this exact zone." You detonate those shells, the concussion wave propagates through the slab. You could drop the entire bowl straight onto 30 homes. Karen stepped between us, arms crossed so tight her parka squeaked. Mr. Riker, if you take one more step toward my vendor, I will have security remove you from HOA common areas. These are my common areas too, I said. And Colorado Revised Statutes, Title 33. Section 109 explicitly prohibits unauthorized fireworks in designated avalanche terrain. Read it sometime. Her eyes narrowed to slits. Quote all the statutes you want. The show proceeds at 9. I turned to Joel, who now looked like he'd swallowed a snowball. Your company name's on every crate, son. When the insurance investigators come asking why you fired commercial shells without permits on a red-flagged slope, remember this conversation. He went the color of printer paper. I walked away before Karen could find the words to threaten me again. By late afternoon, the party was in full swing. Mulled wine flowed. Marshmallow sticks glowed orange over propane flames. Someone had set up a selfie station with a cardboard cutout of a grinning firework. Karen circulated like a politician on election night, cheeks flushed with triumph, accepting compliments the way other people accept oxygen. I retreated inside, checked my monitors. The seismograph sat quiet, needle steady. The trail cam feed showed 8 mortar racks, already loaded tubes angled skyward like artillery pieces. Wires snaked across the snow to a firing board tucked behind a plywood shield. Everything neat, professional, and catastrophically wrong. At 8:45 p.m., I stepped back outside. The crowd had swollen to well over 100 bundled figures glowing under strings of lights. Karen climbed onto a small platform at the trailhead, microphone in hand, voice booming through the PA. This year tested us, she declared, but tonight we prove. Aspen Ridge is unbreakable. Let the sky remind us who we are. Cheers erupted. Glow sticks waved like a neon ocean. I scanned the ridge one last time. The air had gone dead calm, the kind of stillness that presses on your eardrums. Snow crystals hung suspended, catching starlight like powdered diamonds. Karen raised a walkie-talkie. Fire in the hole. Commence countdown. A single sharp crack split the night. The first shell, streaked upward, burst into a perfect red chrysanthemum that lit the snow, blood bright. Another followed, then another. Booms rolled down the valley, each concussion punching the air hard enough to rattle windows half a mile away. My seismograph needle twitched, danced, settled. 10 more rounds, full sequence, Joel's voice crackled over an open channel he'd forgotten to secure. Then the 5th shell. It left the tube low, a misfire mortar, kicking hard. The detonation wasn't in the sky. It was against the snowpack itself, a deep, bone-rattling thud that rolled across the ridge like a giant slamming a fist into the mountain's chest. The slope answered instantly. A sharp crystalline crack, not from the fireworks, not from speakers, from the mountain itself. On the trail cam feed, I watched the fracture shoot across the slope, a jagged white lightning bolt racing 200 feet in under a second. The entire starting zone shuddered, cornice collapsing in slow motion, and then the slab let go. People were still cheering. I was already running. Avalanche. I roared, voice tearing out of me like a mortar round. Everyone off the street, move, move, move! Some turned confused. A few laughed, thinking it was part of the show. Then the roar hit low and hungry, growing into a freight train howl that swallowed every other sound on Earth. The white wall came fast, 30 feet high, and gaining speed, tearing down the gut of Firewatch Ridge, straight at the heart of Aspen Ridge. And in that frozen second, as I shoved a screaming teenager out of the path and dove behind a parked SUV, I realized the real show had only just begun. The roar didn't sound like snow. It sounded like the end of the world being dragged downhill by its teeth. I pressed my back against the cold steel of the SUV as the leading edge of the slide hit the cul-de-sac. A wall of white exploded over the hood, slammed the windshield, and kept coming. The vehicle rocked on its suspension like a boat in a hurricane. Powder poured through every crack, filling the air until I couldn't see my own gloved hands. The pressure wave punched the breath from my lungs and left a high singing note in my ears. Then just as suddenly the main body thundered past, 30 yards to my left, ripping sheds off foundations, snapping mature pines like matchsticks, burying Maple Court under a moving river of house-sized blocks. The tail end of the flow finally sighed to a stop with a sound like a giant exhaling, and the silence that followed was worse than the roar. The first human sound I heard was Karen. A single animal shriek, raw and unrecognizable. My house. Oh God, my house. She was on her knees, 20 feet away, red parka half torn off one shoulder, face streaked black with mascara and snow. The microphone still dangled from her hand like a dead thing. No one answered her. No one even looked at her. Parents were clawing through the powder for children. A golden retriever spun in circles leash, trailing barking at a wall of snow where its owner had been standing seconds earlier. Someone was vomiting into a drift. Someone else was laughing high, broken laughter that meant shock had already set in. I forced myself upright. My legs felt borrowed. I keyed the handheld radio I'd clipped to my coat that morning, the one tuned to the county SAR frequency. Pitkin SAR, this is Harlan Riker Aspen Ridge. Snow event confirmed. Full crown release off Firewatch Ridge. Approximately 800 vertical feet, track width, 200 meters debris runout to Maple Court and Pine Hollow. Multiple structures impacted. Possible entrapments, units 14 through 19. Request immediate snowcat and beacon teams. Over. A beat of static, then Dale's voice tight but steady. Harlan. Jesus. Copy all. We're rolling code 3. Snowcats and medevac chopper airborne. ETA 12 to 15 mics. You boots on, brother. Already moving. I killed the channel, cracked a red flare, and jammed it into the snowbank so the rescue column would have a beacon. Then I started toward the debris field. The air reeked of pine sap and propane. Somewhere a tank hissed, sharp and metallic. The slide had carved a clean path straight through the neighborhood, leaving one side of the street untouched and the other half buried under 25 feet of compacted chaos. Neighbors were already forming a ragged line, dazed but moving. Someone handed me a collapsible shovel without a word. We became a chain without orders, without Karen, without anything except the single shared understanding that people we knew were under there. First house I reached belonged to the Millers. Roof peak still visible, but the entire west wall had been peeled away like the lid of a sardine can. I heard muffled banging inside. We're here, keep knocking. I attacked the snow with the crowbar I'd carried under my coat since morning. The door frame was bowed inward, but the pry bar screamed and gave. Cold air and darkness rushed out. Inside, Ellen Miller and her teenage son Noah were crouched under the kitchen island faces, gray eyes huge. Harlan, Ellen whispered, as if saying my name might make me disappear. I've got you, I said, and meant it more than I'd ever meant anything. I helped them out into the red flare light. Noah was shaking so hard, his teeth rattled. Ellen just stared at what was left of her home, then at the mountain, then at me. You told us, she said quietly. You told us all. Before I could answer, Dale's snowcat roared up the access road, beacon lights painting the snow strobing red and blue. He vaulted out, still buckling his helmet. Harlan talked to me. I shoved a USB drive into his gloved hand, trail cam footage, seismograph logs, launch timestamps, everything. Evidence, I said. Every second is on there, including the misfire that lit the fuse. He looked at me for a long second, eyes hard in the flare glow. You're not just a soldier tonight, brother. You're the prosecution's star witness. Behind us, Karen was still on her knees, trying to stand, slipping, trying again. She looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen her. She locked eyes with me across the chaos. You said... I said exactly what would happen, I answered, voice flat. You called it paranoia. Tears froze on her cheeks in perfect tracks. What do we do now? She whispered. I didn't waste breath on her. I turned back to the debris field, flare smoke curling into the night behind me, and went to work. Because the mountain wasn't finished speaking yet, and neither was I. The rescue went on for hours under floodlights that turned the snow the color of bone. Snowcats growled up and down the access road, chains clanking. Helicopters thumped overhead searchlights, carving white tunnels through the darkness. Probe lines formed and reformed red-jacketed SAR techs, moving like ants across a broken sugar cube. Every time a beacon pinged or a dog sat and barked, the entire neighborhood held its breath. We found 3 dogs, one very indignant cat in a kitchen cabinet, and 2 retirees who had been watching the fireworks from their upstairs window when the slide punched through the downstairs wall. They were cold, bruised, and alive. That was enough for tonight. By 3:17 a.m., the active search was called. No fatalities, no critical injuries. The mountain had roared, but it had not taken a single life. Miracles still happen even when arrogance invites disaster. I finally trudged home through ankle-deep slop where the plows had pushed the debris. My porch light was still on. I'd left it burning like a promise. Inside the seismograph sat quiet now, needle finally still, as if the mountain itself had exhaled and gone back to sleep. I cracked a single beer, drank half in one pull, and let the silence settle. My phone lit up with an email from the Colorado Avalanche Information Center. Subject line: "Thank you for your warning. Report forwarded to Colorado Attorney General, body Mr. Riker. Your documentation has been received and is being treated with the highest priority. It may form the backbone of any future enforcement action against negligent parties. Well done." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Finally, someone had listened. But it had cost us half a neighborhood and every illusion we'd ever had about safety. Dawn came pale and merciless, the kind of light that shows every scar. Emergency tarps flapped over half-collapsed roofs. Yellow tape snapped in the wind. News vans were already parked at the entrance like vultures wearing satellite dishes. I was on my second cup of coffee when Sheriff Dalton's cruiser rolled up my driveway. He got out, slow hat in hand, looking like he'd slept about as much as I had. "Morning, Harlan." "Sheriff." He handed me a fresh folder, thick official state seal on the cover. "Preliminary incident report. Your trail cam footage is Exhibit A1. Seismograph data A2. We've got 3 agencies asking for formal statements by Monday. Avalanche Center Fire Marshal AG's office. They all want you first." I took the folder, felt its weight. "Karen's already lawyering up," he added quietly. "Claims the slide was a natural event, that you tampered with evidence, that this is some kind of personal grudge." I laughed once, short and ugly. "She can claim the moon's made of cheese. The mountain recorded every decibel." Dalton nodded, eyes on the ridge, where the crown fracture still gaped like a fresh wound. "Thought you'd want a heads up. She's got friends in Denver, real estate money. They'll try to bury this in paperwork." "Let them dig," I said. "I've got time." He started to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Some guy showed up at the command post an hour ago. Big fella, Navy windbreaker badge on a lanyard. Said he was an HOA appointed investigator. Wanted access to your trail cams and the seismograph. Dale told him to pound snow." I felt the corner of my mouth twitch. "Name: Greg Tilden. Ring any bells?" "Karen's new attack dog." Dalton tipped his hat. "Watch your 6, Harlan." After he left, I opened the folder on my kitchen table and spread the photos like tarot cards. The mortar racks, the misfired shell, the fracture propagating the debris cloud swallowing Maple Court, time-stamped to the millisecond. I took fresh prints, slid them into sheet protectors, and locked them in the fire safe with the USB drives. Then I poured the rest of the cold coffee down the sink, laced my boots, and stepped back outside. Because the fight wasn't over. It was just changing battlefields. By noon, the retaliation began. A white SUV with Aspen Ridge HOA decals parked across the street. Greg Tilden got out, sunglasses reflecting the wreckage, clipboard in hand. He spent 20 minutes walking my fence line, taking pictures of my shed, my satellite dish, the fake birdhouse still mounted on the service trail. He never once looked at the half-buried houses 2 blocks away. I watched from the porch until he finished, then walked down the driveway. "Help you?" I asked. He didn't flinch. Greg Tilden, licensed code enforcement officer contracted by the Aspen Ridge Homeowners Association. "I'm documenting violations." "Violations," I repeated. "Unauthorized surveillance equipment on HOA common areas. Section 4.7.3 of the covenants. Also unapproved accessory structures and electronic devices without prior board approval." He handed me a folded notice. HOA violation citation, subject unauthorized surveillance and monitoring devices, fine, $3,000, lien pending if unresolved in 14 days. I read it twice, snow melting off my boots onto the paper. Families were still digging wedding albums out of frozen debris. A little girl down the street had lost every toy she owned. And Karen's priority was slapping a $3,000 lien on the man who had spent the night pulling neighbors out of the snow. I folded the notice once slowly and handed it back. "Tell Karen she just declared war," I said. "And she picked the wrong veteran." Tilden's smirk faltered. I turned and walked inside without another word. That afternoon, I called Laura. Former JAG Colonel, old friend from Ramstein. The kind of lawyer who eats HOAs for breakfast. I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a long 5 seconds. "Then Harlan, they just handed you their throats. Retaliatory enforcement after a public safety whistleblower event. That's textbook abuse of process. We're not just defending. We're counterattacking." Music to my ears. Give me 24 hours. I'll have a temporary restraining order and a civil complaint drafted that'll make their ears bleed. I hung up, looked out at the ridge, and for the first time since the slide, I smiled. The mountain had spoken once. Now it was my turn. I turned my house into a forward operating base, and I did it without apology. Within 48 hours, every corner of the property was covered by new 4K cameras, motion-triggered night vision cloud-backed tamper alarms, loud enough to wake the dead. 2 faced the street. 1 watched the back trail that led to the ridge. A 4th stared straight down at my own front porch like a silent sentry. I bolted a small stainless steel sign to the gate. Property under 24-hour recorded surveillance footage provided to legal counsel and law enforcement upon request. Let them come. Laura worked faster than artillery. By the 3rd morning after the avalanche, I had a thick Federal Express envelope on my kitchen table. Emergency motion for temporary restraining order against Aspen Ridge, HOA. Civil complaint for retaliatory harassment, abuse of process, and violation of CRS 38 to 33.3. HOA. Limitations on silencing safety advocacy. Demand for preservation of all HOA records, including deleted emails and security cam footage. She'd already filed it in Pitkin County District Court. The hearing was set for the following week. I wasn't waiting for a judge to save me. I started building the file that would bury them. 5 neighbors people who had once avoided eye contact in the mailbox alcove now stood in my living room, coffee in hand, signing sworn affidavits. I heard Karen Lowell brag on December 29th that she would shut Harlan Riker down for good. Treasurer Allen told me the PyroWorks contract was signed without a board vote. Karen personally deleted the Avalanche risk discussion from the January meeting minutes. I scanned every page, triple backed up, and mailed courtesy copies to the sheriff, the AG's investigator Valerie Park, and 3 separate news outlets. Then I did something I'd never done in 22 years of soldiering. I went public. I created a bare-bones WordPress site titled Avalanche of Authority. No ads, no donations, no drama. Just the truth in chronological order. December 10th, my original snow pit photos and CAIC warning. December 27th, HOA cease and desist letter threatening libel. December 31st, trail cam stills of the misfire seismograph spike fracture propagation. January 2nd, the $3,000 violation notice issued while bodies were still being dug out. I blurred faces where I had to, but I left every official document untouched. Within 48 hours, the site had 10,000 unique visitors. By the end of the week, it was over 100,000. Emails poured in former HOA victims from Telluride, Breckenridge, Steamboat. A snow scientist from Switzerland sent a technical breakdown confirming the fireworks were the trigger. A retired Denver Post reporter offered to help write a longer piece when you're ready. I wasn't ready, not yet, because Karen still had 1 card left to play. January 4th, 2:17 a.m. My phone buzzed like an angry Hornet motion alert rear camera. I rolled out of bed, already reaching for pants. The live feed lit the dark room. Alan Park, yes. The same treasurer who once snuck glances at me in meetings was creeping along my back fence, flashlight beam jerking across my shed, my generator, the corner of the garage. He carried a manila folder thick with what looked like printed photographs. I hit record on every camera pulled on boots and stepped outside into -10 air wearing nothing but thermals and fury. The cold slapped me awake. Lose something, Alan. My voice carried like a rifle shot in the stillness. He dropped the flashlight. It rolled beams spinning crazily across the snow. Harlan, this isn't, Karen said. At 2 in the morning, he tried to stuff the folder behind his back. Too late. I'd already seen the top page close-up photos of my trail cam birdhouse with red circles and the words, violation evidence. Walk away, Alan, I said quietly. Right now. While you still can. He swallowed so hard I heard it. She said if I didn't get fresh documentation, she'd remove me from the board. My wife's on the Architectural Review Committee. We can't afford. Your choice, I cut in. Trespass again, and you're on camera talking to the sheriff in handcuffs. Tell Karen the next envelope she gets won't be from me. It'll be a subpoena. He backed away, stumbled, nearly fell, then turned and half ran into the dark. I stood there until his footprints were the only thing moving. Then I uploaded the entire clip, time-stamped, watermarked, pristine, to 4 separate cloud drives and emailed stills to Laura Sheriff Dalton and Valerie Park at the AG's office with the subject line, Midnight Trespass by HOA Treasurer, Exhibit J. By 9:00 a.m. the next day, the Aspen Journal had it as an exclusive. By noon, Karen called an emergency special hearing. The agenda was 1 line long. Item 1. Review of conduct. Harlan James Riker, possible outcomes, suspension of voting rights, expulsion from Aspen Ridge, HOA. They wanted me erased. They scheduled it for January 5th at 7:00 p.m. in the lodge. I looked at the email, then at the ridge, still scarred white and brutal in the morning sun, and I smiled the kind of smile that has no warmth in it at all. They had just handed me the perfect stage, and I was bringing every piece of ammunition I owned. January 5th, 6:47 p.m. The lodge smelled of wet wool, burnt coffee, and fear. Every seat was taken. People stood 3 deep along the pine-paneled walls. The folding tables had been pushed into a long rectangle, like a tribunal. Karen Lowell sat dead center, crimson parka, traded for a charcoal blazer that still somehow looked like armor. Flanking her were the 4 remaining board members, none of whom would meet my eyes. Alan Park's chair was conspicuously empty. A single printed agenda lay in front of each seat. Special emergency meeting, Item 1, Review of conduct. Harlan James Riker, possible sanctions. Suspension of voting privileges, permanent expulsion from Aspen Ridge, HOA membership. Karen tapped the gavel once. The crack sounded like a starter pistol. Before we begin, she said, voice smooth and poisonous, I want to remind everyone that this is a private proceeding. Recording devices are strictly prohibited. I stepped through the door carrying a banker's box. Every head turned. I was wearing my dress blues ribbons, no fruit salad, just the ones that mattered. The combat infantryman badge and the bronze star with V caught the fluorescent light like accusations. The room went quieter than fresh powder. I walked to the front, set the box on the table with a deliberate thud, and placed a thick manila envelope in front of each board member. 5 envelopes total. Karen got hers last. She stared at the sealed flap as if it might bite. Before you open that, I said loud enough for the cheap microphone to carry to the back row, I want the record to show that this hearing is in direct violation of Colorado Revised Statutes 38 to 30.32095. A Homeowners Association may not discipline a member for exercising free speech on matters of public safety. The Avalanche of December 31st was exactly that, a public safety emergency. Everything I have done since has been protected conduct. Karen's lips thinned. Mr. Riker, you are out of order. No, ma'am, you are. I nodded toward the side door. Sheriff Dalton stepped in, hat tucked under one arm, court officer at his shoulder, carrying a clipboard. Dalton didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone made half the room shrink. Karen recovered first. This is intimidation, she hissed. No, I said, turning back to the table. This is accountability. Open the envelopes. They did. Inside each. 1. A full-color 8x10 still of Alan Park trespassing on my property. At 2:17 a.m. timestamp, glowing red. 2. A certified copy of the temporary restraining order granted at 3:42 p.m. today, prohibiting the HOA from any further enforcement actions against me until a full hearing. 3. A subpoena from the Colorado Attorney General's office addressed to Karen Lowell, President, Aspen Ridge, HOA, demanding 5 years of financial records and all correspondence related to Pyroworks, LLC. 4. A letter on State of Colorado letterhead requesting Karen Lowell recuse herself from any vote involving Harlan Riker due to clear conflict of interest and ongoing criminal investigation. The room temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Karen's face cycled through 3 shades of red before settling on corpse white. You can't, she started. I already have, I said, and I'm not finished. I reached into the banker's box and lifted out a portable projector, plugged it into the lodge's ancient outlet. The white wall lit up with the first slide. Fireworks misfire, 21:03:12. Trail cam footage 4K slowed to quarter speed. The low shell, the detonation against the snow. The fracture line racing across the slope like a zipper pulled by an invisible hand. The crown collapsing. The entire bowl releasing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Next slide, seismograph spike timestamped to the millisecond. Next, the cease and desist letter they had sent me on December 29th. Next, the $3,000 violation notice dated January 2nd while rescue helicopters were still overhead. I let the images hang in silence for a full 10 seconds. Then I turned to the room. Every one of you received flyers promising a safe, permitted show. None of you were told there were no permits. None of you were told the Colorado Avalanche Center rated that slope high to very high. None of you were told your HOA president ignored every warning because she wanted her spectacle more than she wanted your lives. I looked straight at Karen. Tonight, you were prepared to vote to expel the only person who tried to stop this disaster. While children were still being dug out of the snow, someone in the back row started clapping. Slow, deliberate. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. Not for Karen, for the truth. Karen slammed the gavel so hard the head flew off. This meeting is adjourned. She stood chair scraping backward and stormed toward the side exit. No one followed her. Dalton stepped forward, blocking the door just long enough to hand her a folded, blue-backed document. Karen Lowell, you've been served. She snatched it, face twisted with rage, and shoved past him into the night. The lodge doors slammed shut behind her. The sound echoed like the mountain finally closing its mouth. I powered down the projector, gathered my box, and walked out into the cold. Outside, the sky was clear and viciously bright with stars. The ridge stood black and silent above us, Scar still glowing pale under moonlight. A woman I barely knew, Dana from Pine Hollow Lane, touched my sleeve. "Thank you," she whispered. "We should have listened." I just nodded. Because some nights there are no words big enough. Only the quiet after the truth has finally been allowed to speak. January 5th did not end in the lodge. It ended on the ridge itself because Karen Lowell could not let the night die quietly. At 7:42 p.m., less than an hour after she fled the meeting with the subpoena burning a hole in her pocket, the HOA newsletter blast went out to every resident. Special community healing event, Snowlight. A celebration of resilience. Tonight, 9:30 p.m. Firewatch Ridge, overlook low-impact pyrotechnics, soft music, cocoa, and togetherness. Let's show the world. Aspen Ridge is unbreakable. No vote, no discussion, just another royal decree. I was still in my dress blues, standing on my porch, when the first trucks started rolling past unmarked white box vans. No logos, Idaho plates. Crates stamped FX Ignite in plain black stencil. Two men in black hoodies and gray beanies unloading mortar tubes like they were setting up for a backyard barbecue. The snowpack had reset after the first slide, but daytime highs, the last 3 days had climbed to 38 degrees. Melt freeze crust on top, faceted sugar beneath. Every forecaster in the state had bumped the danger to high again. I had the bulletin open on my phone. Persistent weak layer remains highly reactive. Remote triggers possible. Travel in avalanche terrain not recommended. I knew what this was. This was Karen's Alamo. Her final proof that she still ruled the mountain. I called Laura, straight to voicemail. Called Dalton, same. Called Dale at SAR. He answered on the second ring. Harlan, I heard. We're already scrambling. Judge is being woken up as we speak. Clock's ticking, brother. I grabbed my trauma kit, beacon probe shovel, and the emergency injunction Laura had pre-drafted just in case. I printed it, signed the affidavit myself, scanned it, and emailed it to the on-call judge with the subject line, urgent, imminent danger to life. Then I walked. By the time I reached the trailhead at 8:55 p.m., 50 or 60 people had already gathered. Some looked excited, some looked uneasy. A few held paper cups and stared at the ridge like they were trying to remember why this felt familiar. Karen stood beside a propane patio heater, brand new loudspeaker at her feet, clipboard, glowing under a headlamp. She had changed into a white parka Innocence by North Face. I stepped into the circle of light. You received the first injunction this afternoon, I said loud enough for everyone to hear. Here's the second. I held up the fresh court order, still warm from the printer. 9th Judicial District. Emergency order. All explosive devices, fireworks, and amplified sound prohibited on Firewatch Ridge and within 500 yards of prior release zones until full environmental review. Violation punishable as criminal contempt. Karen's smile didn't waver. Harlan always so dramatic. These are consumer-grade shells from Idaho. Very low percussion. The vendor assured me there is no safe percussion on a slope rated high with a known persistent slab I cut in. You are literally standing in the starting zone of the last slide. A few people started backing away. Karen raised the loudspeaker. Everyone please, this is fear-mongering. We've had a hard week. Tonight is about healing. Headlights swept the clearing. Sheriff Dalton's cruiser slid to a stop, red and blues painting the snow. He stepped out with a court officer and 2 deputies. Karen Lowell Dalton called voice carrying without needing amplification by order of the 9th District Court. You will cease all fireworks activity immediately. Any attempt to launch will result in arrest for criminal contempt and reckless endangerment. The Idaho crew froze mid-setup. Karen looked around. The crowd that had once cheered her now stared in stunned silence. A mother pulled her child closer. Someone whispered, "She's really doing it again." Karen's jaw trembled. She opened her mouth, rage, denial, something, but nothing came out. For the first time in her life, Karen Lowell had no audience left to command. She dropped the loudspeaker. It hit the snow with a dull thud. Then she turned and walked into the trees, footsteps crunching hard and fast until the darkness swallowed her. No one followed. Dalton approached me, handed back the signed order. "How long you been carrying that one in your pocket?" "Since the first slide," I said. "Just needed her to cross the line one more time." He shook his head, almost smiling. "You'd have made a hell of a prosecutor, Harlan." "I prefer preventing the crime," I answered, looking up at the ridge. The stars were out in force, sharp and cold and indifferent. The mountains stayed quiet. For now. But both of us knew mountains have long memories. And some debts come due slowly. The second avalanche didn't wait for another firework. It waited for the mountain to finish what it had started. January 7th, 4:12 a.m. I was already awake, running stability models on my laptop, coffee long gone cold. The previous day had hit 38 degrees at the mid-slope weather station, warm enough to percolate meltwater deep into the pack, lubricating the same faceted garbage that had survived the first slide. I had a knot in my gut the size of a mortar shell. Then the house moved. Not a shake, a compression. A sudden vertical drop of pressure that made the windows flex inward and the seismograph needle slam against the peg so hard the pen snapped. The sound wasn't loud at first. It was intimate. Like the entire mountain exhaled at once, and every snow crystal decided to fall downhill together. I was out the door in boxers and boots before the rumble reached full voice. The crown broke across almost 250 feet of the upper shelf, wider, meaner, and deeper than New Year's. Moonlight painted the fracture line silver as it raced across the slope, a perfect curved smile that widened into a scream. The slab released in one continuous sheet, accelerating from 0 to 60 miles an hour in seconds. I stood on my back deck and watched the mountain eat itself. Trees exploded into splinters. A distant porch light vanished in a white flash. The roar rolled down the valley like artillery in an echo chamber deep enough to vibrate teeth. My radio was already in my hand. Pitkin-Sar, this is Harlan Riker. Code Black, Firewatch Ridge. Full depth slab release, repeat full depth. Run out projecting to Pine Hollow Lane. 4 structures in the path. I'm en route. Dale's voice came back instantly hoarse with adrenaline. Copy, Harlan. We're rolling everything. You're the first call again. I threw on Thermal's beacon helmet, avalanche airbag, and the full trauma kit. Grabbed probe and shovel. Was down the street before the debris cloud settled. Pine Hollow Lane was gone. 4 homes simply gone, not buried. Obliterated. The slide had come in hot and chaotic, punching straight through foundations and spitting roofs out the other side like broken toys. One chimney stood alone, still smoking from a fireplace that no longer existed. A man staggered barefoot in the snow, eyes wide, staring at the place his garage used to be. Sir, can you hear me?" He turned dazed. It was thunder inside the walls. Then the walls weren't there. I guided him to a drift, wrapped my jacket around him. "Stay put. Help's coming." Behind us, the crying started, real raw animal sounds. A dog howled from deep under a roof slab. A woman screamed Ava, Ava over and over until her voice cracked. I probed the first debris pile beacon, searching, yelling names I didn't know yet. Then I saw her. Karen. She was sitting in the snow in flannel pajamas and bare feet, knees drawn to her chest, phone clutched like a rosary. Frost already rimed her hair. I ran to her. "Karen, are you hurt?" She looked up. The woman who once commanded rooms with a glance now looked small enough to blow away. "I thought it was over," she whispered. "I thought if we didn't light them again, it would be over." I crouched, checked her pupils, felt for pulse. Cold, shocky, but intact. "You shook the mountain twice," I said, voice low. It only needed one excuse. Helicopters thumped in low thermal imagers glowing. Snowcats carved trenches through the debris. Handlers released avalanche dogs that bounded across the chaos like black and white missiles. I worked the probe line for 4 straight hours. We pulled a family of 3 from a bathroom that had somehow stayed intact, father weeping in my arms, repeating, "I read your blog. I should have listened. I should have listened." We found the dog. We found Ava, 8 years old, alive, curled inside an air pocket under her bed frame. By the time the sun bled pale over the ridge, the tally stood at 0 fatalities. Again. The mountain had roared louder than ever and still spared every life. But it had taken every illusion we had left. The National Avalanche Center's final report dropped 3 days later. One sentence burned itself into my brain. The secondary release, on January 7th, was a direct consequence of destabilization initiated by man-made detonations on December 31st. Human activity remained the proximate cause. Karen Lowell was named in paragraph 4. I printed the report, walked to the HOA mailbox, and dropped it in. No note, just the truth heavy as wet cement. That evening, I got a single text from Alan Park. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow. She's resigning. You were right about everything." I stared at the screen a long time, then deleted the message and stepped outside. The ridge was quiet. The scar ran from crown to toe like a lightning bolt frozen in snow. But for the first time in weeks, the quiet didn't feel like a threat. It felt like the mountain finally closing its fist. The days after the second avalanche were the color of ash and exhaustion. No one slept properly. The neighborhood moved like a field hospital after battle, slow-stunned but strangely gentle. People who once argued over fence stains now stood shoulder to shoulder in sub-zero dawn, passing shovels coffee, and the quiet understanding that we had all been inches from graves. FEMA tents bloomed along the eastern cul-de-sac like white mushrooms. Insurance adjusters in Patagonia vests took photos of homes that looked like God had taken a bite out of them. Red X's were spray-painted on doors that would never open again. Kids built snowmen on lawns that were no longer lawns, just debris fields wearing winter's disguise. I spent the first 72 hours doing what I knew: triage salvage listening. Miguel and Dana's little blue house on Pine Hollow had taken the full punch. When I got there, Dana was on her knees in what used to be the kitchen, scraping frozen lasagna off a photograph with numb fingers. I knelt beside her. "You shouldn't be in here without gloves." She didn't look up. We were going to skip the party. Miguel said, "Let's just stay home, watch the ball drop on TV." I told him we should support the community, that Karen meant well. Her voice cracked on the last 2 words like thin ice. We dug in silence until we found the bent silver frame. Inside their wedding photo, smiling, sunburned, alive. Dana pressed it to her chest and cried the way soldiers cry, no sound, just shaking. I held her until the shaking stopped. Avalanches don't just take houses. They take futures you hadn't finished paying for. By the end of the week, Karen Lowell had vanished. Her Volvo was gone from the garage. Her name disappeared from the HOA website like it had been erased with bleach. Alan confirmed it in a single shame-soaked email. She tendered resignation by email at 4:03 a.m. One sentence. No apology. She's gone. Just like that. The Queen abdicated without a coronation speech. But the crown she left behind was radioactive. The Attorney General's investigator Valerie Park showed up at my door on January 12th with 2 assistants and a warrant that read like poetry. "We're not just looking at negligence anymore, Harlan. We're looking at fraud, embezzlement, reckless endangerment with aggravating circumstances. Your files are the spine of the case." I handed her 3 fresh USB drives and a printed binder thick as a phone book. Everything's time-stamped, nothing redacted. She flipped through the stills of the fake PyroWorks crates, the forged insurance cert, the bank records showing payments routed to K. Lowell Trust, Reno, NV. "How much are we talking?" I asked. "North of $48,000 minimum. And that's just the fireworks scam. We're still pulling threads on landscaping kickbacks and security upgrades that never happened." I whistled low. She didn't just ignore the warnings Valerie said. She sold the neighborhood a lie and pocketed the change. 2 weeks later, the charges dropped. 6 felony counts of theft by deception. 2 counts of reckless endangerment. 1 count of criminal negligence resulting in catastrophic property damage. Karen's mugshot hit every front page from Denver to Durango. The same woman who once posed for HOA Christmas cards, now pale and hollow-eyed under fluorescent lights. The comment sections lit up like the fireworks she never should have bought. The HOA itself was placed into state receivership on February the 3rd. A court-appointed administrator took the keys to the lodge and froze every account. When the auditors opened the books, the rot went 5 layers deep, backdated votes, deleted minutes, checks written to companies that existed only on paper. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, because the universe has a sense of humor, the community held a special vote. Question: shall the Aspen Ridge Homeowners Association be permanently dissolved? Result 100, 0, not one abstention. The lodge was reborn as a true community center. No board, no dues, no covenants, stronger than don't be a jerk. The first thing the kids did was paint the mailboxes every color of the rainbow. No one found them. Wildflowers came early that spring, pushing up through the avalanche debris like they'd been waiting for permission. Bright, defiant, impossible. New roots grow strongest in broken ground. And for the first time since I moved to this mountain, the silence felt like peace instead of a held breath. The mountain and I had finally come to terms. By the time the snow finally surrendered to spring, Aspen Ridge no longer looked like the place I had bought into. The scars were still there, long white gashes on Firewatch Ridge that would take years to fill in, but they were no longer wounds. They were proof. Proof that we had survived not 1 but 2 avalanches. Proof that a neighborhood could tear down its own tyrant and choose something better. The HOA was gone. Dead and buried, deeper than any slide path. In its place rose something quieter and infinitely stronger: neighbors, who now waved without checking the covenant manual first, kids who played street hockey, without fear of violation letters, mailboxes painted turquoise, and barn red and sunflower yellow because no one could tell them not to. In May, we held a gathering at the lodge, no longer an HOA throne room, just a big log building with good coffee and worse folding chairs. Someone dragged in picnic tables. Someone else fired up the chili pot. A bluegrass trio from Down Valley played on the porch while children ran barefoot through the first green grass. They asked me to speak. I tried to refuse, but Dana Wedding Photo, now reframed and hanging in their temporary rental, simply handed me the microphone and said, "You started this, you finish it." So I stood on the same steps where Karen once issued decrees and looked out at 200 faces that no longer flinched when someone spoke the truth. "My name is Harlan Riker," I began. 2 years ago, I moved here, looking for quiet. I thought silence would be enough. But silence controlled by fear isn't peace. It's a prison with better views. I paused. The mountains listened. We were lucky. Luckier than any community has a right to be. We lost homes, memories, illusions, but we did not lose a single life. That is a debt we can never repay. Only honor every day we wake up breathing. A soft wind moved through the pines. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who couldn't sleep when the mountain was talking. I listened. And because I did, I almost lost everything else. But tonight I'm standing here richer than I have ever been. Because I live among people who finally learned how to speak for themselves. I look toward the ridge, now soft with new snowmelt and the first brave wildflowers. This mountain belongs to all of us. Your voice belongs to all of us. Never again let anyone sell you a fireworks show in exchange for your right to say no. The applause started slow, then rolled down the valley like gentle thunder. Afterward, Dale found me on the porch with 2 bourbons and a small wooden box. "From the SAR team," he said. "We took up a collection." Inside was a hand-carved plaque, letters burned deep into cedar. "To Harlan Riker, the man who heard the mountain and taught us all to listen." Beneath it, a photograph of me on the night of the first slide, kneeling in the snow beside the seismograph flare light painting my face red. I couldn't speak. Dale clinked his glass against mine. "To the quiet ones who refused to stay quiet." I drank. Later, when the sun bled gold across the peaks and the last kid had been carried home asleep on a shoulder, I hiked the new trail that now winds gently up Firewatch Ridge. No more overlook, just a simple loop with benches and signs that read, "No before you go." At the highest point, someone had placed a small cairn. On top rested a smooth river stone. Someone had painted on it in careful black letters, "Thank you, Harlan. We hear it now." I added my own stone, set it gently on the pile, and stood there a long time. The wind moved through the pines like breathing. For the first time since my wife died, I spoke aloud to the sky, to the snow, to the mountain that had tried to bury us, and instead taught us how to live. We made it. The ridge did not answer with a roar. It answered with silence. The good kind. The kind that finally feels like home.